Okay, number 19, I'm going to use the intercept method. So if I cross this out, x would be 1. And if I crossed this out, y would be 1. Because there's an equal sign here, I'm graphing a solid line, which is going to be like this. Okay, and when I'm ready to shade, I'm not ready to shade yet, but when I am, if you think of the x, this is less than, so I'd be shading left. If you think of the y, this is the less than, so I'd be shading down. I'm going to be shading on this side of the line. I'll put a tiny little arrow to remind myself that. Okay? Now, let's graph this one. This is going to be a vertical line at the x is positive 1. So let's make a vertical line here. Put an arrow on either side. Okay, now, there's only one variable to consider. It's x. X goes left and right. Because this is greater than, I'm shading this side of the line. So I'll put a little arrow this side of the line. Okay, now, remember that we're shading below this line and to the right of this line. But the and is only the intersecting portion. So the only portion that's below this line and to the right of this line is this area right in here. So that's the area that we're shading. Now, if it was an or instead of an and, we would have shaded everything below this line and everything to the right of this line. So everything would have been shaded. The only portion that wouldn't have been shaded is this portion right here. Okay, the intercept method is the easiest to graph this because both 2 and 1 can go in here. So if I crossed out this and 2x is equal to 2, I divide by 2 and x is equal to 1, so I'll put a dot right there. And then if I were to cross out this, negative y is 2, so y is negative 2. So I put a dot there. Because this is an equal sign here, I'm going to graph a solid line. So I'm going to graph a solid line here. Okay, I'm not ready to shade yet, but when I am, I'm shading the end, and it's I'm going to be shading. Okay, let's look at the x. X goes left and right. This is a positive x, so I'm going to follow this and go to the right, which is this way. If I consider the y goes up and down, but this is a negative y, so I do the opposite of this. So I shade down, which is still this side of the line. So it's that side of the line. Okay, now, y is less than 4. This is a horizontal line at positive 4, but it's dashed because there's no equal sign. So I'm going to put a dashed line here. Arrows on either side. Now, less than means I'm shading to the lower side of this. So I'm shading down. So because I'm after the and, I only want the things that are to the right of this line and lower of this line. So this intersecting portion right in here. Now be careful, if this was an or, I would have been shading everything to the right of this and everything below this. So everything would have been shaded. The only thing not shaded would have been right there. Okay, just cross out this variable, and if x is negative 5, the x value is going to go, we're going to put a dot right there. And then I'm going to cross out this variable, and y is negative 5, so I'm going to put a dot right there. Because there's no equal sign there, I'm drawing a dashed line. So okay, now to decide which side you're going to shade, remember that x goes left or right. This is a positive x and it's greater, so I'm going right. I'm shading this side of it. Okay, I'll put a little arrow to remind myself that side of it. If you consider the y instead, y goes up and down. This is a positive y, so you follow this, and it's the upside, which is still the same side of the line. Okay, this is a horizontal line at negative 2. Okay, it's going to be dashed because there's no equal sign. All right. Now, because this is a less than and this is positive, this is a less than, we're shading the lower side of this line, which is this side of this line. We're after the and, which is the intersecting portion. So we only want the portion that's to the right of this line, but also below this line. So it's just this portion right in there. Okay? Now, if this was an or, I would have shaded everything to the right of this line and everything below this line. Everything would have been shaded. The only portion not shaded would have been this if it had been an or. Okay, remember when you have an absolute value that's greater, you're always going to do it twice. So what we do is we take it out of the absolute value and we leave the inequality and the number after it alone. And then we take it out of the absolute value and we flip both this and this. And then we're going to write two intervals. So I'm going to take this interval, which is from negative infinity up to -3 with a bracket, and I'm going to union that with this interval, which is a +3 bracketed all the way up to positive infinity. Now, that's what this looks like, but on a graph, x is greater than 3. I'll put a dot at +3, and I'm going to put a, oops, what did I just do here? I'll put a solid line, vertical line, which is like this, okay? And greater than shades this side, okay? Then I'm going to go and I'll do this one. I'll put a dot at -3. This is a solid line because of the equals. Arrows on either side. And because of the less than, I'm shading this side of it. Now, you didn't have to do this, but this is implied in here. This interval is that there. This interval is this here. But greater than +3 is this. Less than -3 is this. And that's it. Okay, remember when you have absolute values that are less than, you're going to have one interval when you're done. So you're going to take it out of the absolute value, and you're going to sandwich it in between negative and positive of this. So -2 and +2. Now I'm going to bring my 1 outside of the middle because you always want to solve for the middle portion. So we got to bring the 1 out by subtracting 1, and we got to do that from each section. -2 minus 1 is -3. 2 minus 1 is 1. These are going to be horizontal lines. So I'm going to go to -3, and they're dashed because there's no equal sign. So I'll put a horizontal line there, dashed. And then I'm going to go to +1 and put a dashed line there. And I'm just shading the interval between those two. So this right here. And that's it. Okay, here I'm graphing the union, the or of these. Okay, so now let's just look at this. I'm going to do, because 1 and 1 both go into 1, I'm going to use the intercept method. So in my head, I'll cross this out, and x is +1. So on the x value, I'll put a +1. And then I'm going to cross this out, and -y is +1. That means y is -1. So I'm going to graph that using a solid line because of this. So I'll make a solid line here. Now, I'm not ready to shade yet, but when I am, I'm going to shade. Now let's take a look. If you look at the x is positive, so x goes left to right, and I'm following this because x is positive. So I'm going to the right. I'm going to shade this portion of it. If you were to follow the y is negative, and y goes up, down. But normally you'd shade above, but because it's negative, you shade below. So you either shade to the right or you shade below. It's the same side. We're going to be shading this side. Okay? Then, when you look at y is greater than or equal to negative 2, this is a horizontal line, solid, at 2. And y goes up, down, so we're shading the greater, the upper side of this line. Now, here's the thing. We have to shade everything, not just the intersection. So I'm going to start by shading everything above this line. Okay, that's everything there. And I'm also going to shade everything to the right of this line. So that's everything down here. The only portion that didn't get shaded was this portion right in here. Okay, think of this as an equals. Well, it's already in slope-intercept form, but I'm going to write the y first. So y is on the less than side of x minus 2. I just rewrote that equation. And now I can see that the y-intercept is negative 2, and the slope is a positive 1 over 1. So I'm rising 1 and running 1. There's just a less than, no equal, so when I graph this, I'm graphing a dashed line. Okay, now, because this is a less than, I'm shading to the lower side of this. All right, now on this is a vertical line at positive 1. So I'm drawing a dashed line because there's no equal sign. And I'm doing less than, so the less than is to the left. So I'm shading to the left of this line, and I'm shading to the lower side of this line. But it's not the intersecting portion, it's everything. So on this line, I'll shade everything to the left of this line. Okay? And then for this line, I'm shading everything. What did I just do? I just shade, I did this one right here. I shaded to the left of the 1, which is everything to the left of that line. And then for this line, which is this line here, I'm shading the less than side, which is everything below it. I shaded that backward. But anyway, this is the answer that you're going to get. The only portion that's not shaded is that right there. And that's it. Okay, I'm going to use the intercept method because both 3 and 2 can go into 6. Don't worry about this for now. Just put in equals down. So 3x plus 2y equals 6. I'll write it down twice. I'll cross out one of the variables and solve for the other. So x is equal to 2. So I'll put a dot at 2 on the x-axis. On this one, I'm going to cross out the other variable and solve for this one. And I'll get y is equal to 3. And on the y-axis, I'll put a dot. Now, I'm going to be shading a dashed line because there's no equals. So when I shade this, I'll do a dashed line. Okay, now, the direction of the shading, go to the original line. Consider either one of the variables. This is a positive x. X's go left and right. Because it's positive, I'm following this arrow. I'm going to the left. If I had done the y's go up and down. Because this is positive, I'm following the arrow. I'm going down. So either way, it's this side of the line. Okay? Now, on this one, both 1 and 2 can go into 2. So you can use the intercept method again. I'll just put in equals for now. And what I'll do is I'll cross out this, and I'll have x is equal to 2. So on the x-axis, I'll put a 2 there. And then I'll cross out the other variable. Negative 2y is equal to 2. I'll divide by negative 2. And I'll get y is equal to negative 1. So on the y-axis, I'll put a dot. And there's no equals here, so I'm graphing a dashed line. You know, if you're good at that, you don't need to show the work. You can do that solving in your head. That's in the intercept method. You can often solve it in your head without showing all of this work over here, just by imagining one unknown variables are gone. Okay, now, but when we decide which side we're going to shade on this one, if we think of the x goes left, right. It's positive, so we're following this arrow. So we're going to go to the right of this. So this is pointing to the right. Okay? Now, if we consider the y goes up, down. This is a negative y, though, so instead of going up, we go down, which is on this side of the line. Either way, it's this side of this line and this side of this line. And it's a union, so it's everything. So I'm shading everything on this side of this line and everything on this side of this line. And it's not just the intersection, it's everything. So the only portion that doesn't get shaded is right there. And that's it.